Hey Barb, thanks for joining in.
Fine.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Can you
Good.
hear me?
Yep, and you're unmuted. We're ready to go. So we had a meeting regarding hiring of individuals. A couple different discussions, the budgets, Act 1, it was for the business manager. But what I foresee, and I wanted to get your opinion on, is that this board is trying to hire someone again. And as they try to hire an individual, as a board member, I didn't get to see all the applicants. I only got to see two of them, and apparently there was many. We don't know if anyone is within the district that we could hire, as a advancement within the district, which would be beneficial. And then we also have this issue where um, we're not being fully transparent with the people. This is a very high level individual as a business manager that we're trying to hire. So I wanted to get your thoughts on, first of all, not getting all the applicants. What are you thinking there?
Well, I don't think that you can make an informed decision on hiring someone without seeing all the qualifications, even if they redact the personal information and the name of the person.
I agree, and there's no reason to redact any of that information. It is all public. It is a government agency,
Well,
and
not only that, we would be paying the salary of that person. So
correct.
I can understand where some might have issues with having their information out in the public. And so in order, and previous things that were mentioned, they could remedy that with redaction.
Well, they could, but even then, I mean, you got to call people's references. The board is the one doing the hiring at this point. They're the ones that create the contract. They're the ones that have the responsibility to make sure that when a person is hired, that they meet all the standards, meet all the requirements, background checks, experience levels, and everything else. Um, it doesn't make sense. One of the other things that the board should be doing is asking the questions of the prospective applicant. Now, we recognize that the board is volunteers and they might not understand equal opportunity employment laws, and they might be stupid and ask something dumb. How old are you? Something that would not be proper. So it would make sense to have the questions cleared by, say, the solicitor, and we can understand that. But to have the board not be involved in any of the questions resulted in the either administration or somebody came up with these questions, and we as a board didn't have our input on it. I tried asking for a couple questions, and I was shot down.
Gee, surprise, surprise.
Yeah, I know. But so one of the questions that they asked was, how would you define the role of school business administrator or director? Now, to me, that's the most backward question ever, and it's completely moot because the board decides what the responsibilities of this individual are going to be and then therefore hires to meet those responsibilities. So why would you ever let the person hiring them not to have a list of the responsibilities they're going to be responsible for, and B, why would they have input as to the responsibilities unless they want to add some, or we can understand some of that, but still that's a little putting the cart before the horse. The other one was talking about collective bargaining agreements and the budgets and Act 1. So here's three areas where this individual, this business manager, might be responsible for pulling some reports or collecting some data and providing the board so they can make an educated and informed decision. But by no means should they have authority, control, or be interacting with those events.
Well, I can kind of understand the Act One, as far as do they understand it, because it is my opinion, because I cannot prove it, that they, according to Act One, the preliminary budget has to be available for inspection by anyone in the community 20 days before they vote on it. Now,
Correct.
you and I both know that even the board didn't receive it until the night of the vote.
Well, that's as backwards as it gets. So let's talk about this for a second. It was kind of interesting. They had two, like I said, they only provided two candidates. One candidate referenced the budget that it should be presented to the committees every month, checked, reviewed, discussed, very transparent. It made sense. And it was basically a standard private practice, private business, mindset, right? Every department's got to look at their budgets. They got to know where they're at. They got to know where they're staying, if they're on budget or not. And then the other was a public entity where the budget was like referring to, hey, you always want to present the largest budget in January when you're looking at tax increases under the Act 1, and including a big wish list from what everybody wants, and then you make your cuts from there. So just two completely different mindsets.
I would say yes, that's true.
And then on the Act 1, now this is very silly because that's like asking the business manager, referring to Act 1, that's creating the tax increases. It's kind of like saying, hey, dear Fox, if you had the keys to the hen house, what would you do with them? It just doesn't make sense. It's so backwards that it doesn't make sense. For instance, I wanted to ask the question, and this was one of my questions I wanted to ask the applicant, explain the accounting industry paradoxes, right? Or where they tend to call them accounting paradoxes, with one being that to balance, right? To create a balance between the goal of a good technical skill and the need for articulate managers. Because let's face it, a lot of times you have a very heady financier, but he really can't explain it to the board so that this, I'll use the term, general population board can have the ability to discuss it. And then the second paradox was when you have the person being audited paying for the auditor. There's always going to be a gap between the two ideas of best practices, which is what we're supposed to be following, and within the range is the term. And that's in quotes. Like an auditor will say, well, you're within the range of a best practice in comparison to actually meeting a best practice. So when you have an independent auditor, kind of like our auditor general, he only goes with best practices, or the agency only goes with best practices to remove that credibility gap. Because here we can see that the auditor general shows multiple years of non-compliance with the school code in this district, and yet our individual auditors didn't pick up on that. Because again, it's within the range. They don't have the authority to chastise or admonish the board, whereas the auditor general does, and he did.
I know quite well.
I'll give you a specific, real quick. Let me see if I can share my screen for a second. So I'm going to click on share screen. I'm going to share this screen with you for a second. There you go. It should be up. Can you see the Sunshine Act?
Yes.
Okay. So this is basically front page of the Sunshine Act, Pennsylvania Office of Open Records, and it talks about having an email meeting. Now this is compliance with the law.
Right.
It's all right. It's important to draw a distinction between individual board members discussing agency business, like you and I are, with a member of the public, and multiple agency members discussing agency business among themselves. Keyword, among themselves, right? So then a little further down, voting members of an agency are not permitted to deliberate except at a public meeting. Now, I've been harping on this for ever since I've been a board member and even years before. They don't understand the idea that we're public servants. Well, here you go. That if
you're not.
I know we're supposed to be. It's an email discussion. Okay, exchanging opinions would violate the school. Oh, I'm sorry, would violate the Sunshine Act. So we agree with this idea that if you have voting members of an agency are not permitted to deliberate except in a public meeting. That makes sense. In other words, agency members exchanging opinions about an upcoming vote or encouraging others, agency members, to vote in a particular way in an email discussion or a discussion held over social media would violate the Sunshine Act. So, all right. So we all fully understand what that means. Let me just hit this real quick and then I'm going to try this again. I'm going to stop that share for a second. I'm going to share this screen. All right.
Okay.
Can you read that?
Yes.
Okay, so we got an email from Rita Spinelli. 1, 2, 3, 4 board members. So you got 5 board members, a quorum of board members, and the superintendent discussing interviews with Rita Spinelli, giving her opinions to a majority of the board in a private email. This looks like a direct violation of the Sunshine Act, doesn't it?
Well, yeah.
So what the heck's going on? Why are these people so arrogant? Now, here's the real question you want to ask yourself. Why is she only asking the 4 members of the board that follow the Sunshine Act on a regular basis, that follow this stuff? Is she trying to bait us into a Sunshine Act violation? That's the first question. And then the second question, is she asking us because she already knows what the other 4 think?
I have no idea.
Yeah. I find that disturbing to say the least. But
Well, obviously, there was no thought put into it as to how it would pertain to the law on the Sunshine Act.
yeah, these interviews should have been in public. They should have been a public interview. They have been in the past. Superintendents can be interviewed in public. It's of the public interest. There's no reason not to have these interviews. And the interviews should be more as seeking opportunity for free advice as well. I mean, what would you do in this situation? What do you see, if you're already a business manager, what are you doing to help with the transparency? What are you doing to help reduce the amount of money spent on right to know request restrictions and all that other obstination? What would you do with the Auditor General's report? Did you even read it, or did you have enough interest, prior to attending here, of what you thought? If you're from the business side, hey, what business practices could you bring into this district to help it be more efficient? Because a lot of times public agencies aren't necessarily as efficient as they need to be. But all right, I just wanted to bounce it off of you. But I think we can all agree that these rubber stampers are abdicating this responsibility once again to the board. The board is abdicating it to these administrators to weed out, or filter. I don't think it's fair. It seemed like one applicant didn't have access to the questions prior to attending the interview, which I can understand a little bit of that. But the other one sure did seem to be very well prepped on answering the questions. Maybe because the questions were geared towards conversations they already had. Maybe it was geared towards just the fact that they're common questions for applying for this job, and maybe somebody else applied for it. But the questions about collective bargaining, Act 1, and the budgets should not be in the hands of the business manager, in my opinion at least. And I just wanted to get your input on it.
Well, going back to the email, I don't know, of course, which one answered how. But I personally, depending on what the other qualifications were, and given the issues we've had with our finances, I would personally lean more towards someone who would be more transparent with letting us know where we are with the budget monthly. Because I have a feeling that we're already in deep trouble with this budget that was passed just due to the cyber school costs.
I agree.
We never got a number on how much it costs for lava. We were told at some point there were 180 students in lava at $1,000 each. That's $180,000. Now, are those numbers still true? I don't know. When I asked the question of the superintendent and he responded, he did say as of, I think it was the 18th of August, but I could be wrong on that without looking at the email. Those were the numbers. So I don't know where we are now. And I'm assuming the board doesn't know either.
I know we have not been given any reports, and I also question about the revenue side because there's a lot of people that are hurting, and we didn't provide that tax break. I tried 3 times to get the tax break to the people in the middle of this COVID, and they just wouldn't do it.
And I
It doesn't make sense.
somewhat from their point of view, but not really, because if you give the tax break, people might be able to pay their taxes. If you extended the 2%, they might be able to come up with the money. If they don't come up with money, guess what? You get nothing. So it just makes no sense. I believe Larry said there were a lot of people hurting, but there are a lot of people that weren't. Well, the ones that aren't, unless they're going to pay the taxes for the ones that are, how do you not consider that? I mean,
Even if it was 10%, even if it was 10%, our budget is pretty much split. Half comes from local and half comes from the state and federal.
well,
So about 20 million. You're talking $2 million. You're talking millions of dollars not being collected or not being collected right away. And what's going to happen is, like our old business manager was leaning for, when you can't make your minimum payments, they go out and take another loan out. And that loan kicks the can down the road, and that loan costs more money in interest. And that loan, that's the short sighted view of what's taking place. And I can see it going down this path. And you look at people like Rita, that obviously struggles, and you look at some other situations there, it becomes difficult at best. But
the problem with taking out more loans at this point is, first of all, our credit rating has been downgraded twice. So you're going to pay a higher interest.
and in insurance,
Right. But I'm not talking about bonds per se. I'm talking about a loan just to get you through. I forget what it was called, but a specific type of loan just to get you through, so that you have the money to make your payments. Okay. Um, Not only that, you're going to pay a higher interest rate on that loan because you're a bad credit risk. But what I want to know is, how does the Auditor General's report figure into that? What has that done to the credit rating? I mean, I haven't looked at Moody's, and there is a report out when I looked before, but it would cost me $250 to get it. So I can't do that.
yeah, we could probably check that out. That's something that, as an agency, we should be able to have. We should take a look at it, see if the Auditor General's report affected our Moody's rating at all. Historically, the Moody's rating is a function of the reports we turn into the government that just say what we're collecting and what we're spending and what our debt load is. But that's a good point. We should figure that out. Okay, I'm glad I was able to reach out to you. Do you have anything else you need me to do for you as a public official? I'm going to get you the Moody's report. We're going to try to find out about the number of students that didn't come back to the school and what that was costing us. Anything else? I mean, I take pretty good notes, but I want to make sure I don't miss anything.
Yeah, as far as I know right now, I mean, I assume at the next meeting we'll find out who's our next business administrator.
No, they have to vote on that at the meeting, and I think that hopefully, if this gets out to the public, that they realize that the board, once again, like last month, aren't receiving the applicants. We need to, we as the board should be able to see all the applicants. They should have a better interview process where real questions are asked, not this fluff from the process. And thirdly, is the district stakeholders, the one writing this check, should be able to hear from these people prior to them being offered a position to serve them and serve the board and serve this community, because it's important. I mean,
Well,
if you have the wrong attitude and you have the wrong process in place, you get things. But ultimately, all of these responsibilities come back to the business administrator, to their boss, which is the superintendent, and then the superintendent is subordinate to this board, and these board members have to answer to the public. So this is the hierarchy that's been destroyed because you got people that have elected themselves to office and have failed to honor their oath.
well, I agree, and I have been looking at the superintendent's contract. And it states that he is the one responsible for putting things in place to make sure what happened to us doesn't happen.
Yeah, but it's still our job to hold him accountable.
I get that. I get that. And the board also has to approve every expenditure. I can understand where,
And every contract. And every contract.
yes, that too. And every contract, whenever they're going to spend more than, I think it's $1,000 or a couple $100, it has to go to the board. The board has to approve it. That's in the law. I don't remember what the exact number is. And we've seen it happen.
I believe it's $100, but we're gonna have to cut this short, Barb. I got to get back to what I was doing. We can always have another meeting, but it's coming up on 9 o'clock. Other than those two areas, am I missing anything else you need from me?
I don't think so at
All
this point.
If you use my district email address, dbradley@lehightongovernment.org. If anybody at all needs this information, please get it out to us. And if anybody can, I'll send an email out to everyone I know to share this video so that people can have this conversation. I think it's important that this board act with responsibility. And if we continue down the same path with the same people making the same mistakes, we're going to get the same results.
Exactly. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.